that, that was in the past, but now Pfizer finds itself in the middle of a conversation, and he does too. Tell me what's happening.
And so let's fast forward to present day here.
Okay.
And this is some big things happening out of Europe. So in March of 2022, the European Parliament basically unanimously voted to create an investigative panel to look into the COVID-19 response. And what this was going to do is look at, can we learn some lessons about this? Where was our money going? How was it spent? Was it spent wisely? And who did they ask to come testify at this panel? Albert Bourla himself, the person that has no problem going all over the media, showing up at any media interview to talk about his product. Well, there was a problem. He couldn't make it. He pulled out. He did not want to show up there. This was the headline out of Politico. Pfizer CEO pulls out of testifying to EU Parliament COVID-19 panel. He sent a woman named Janine Small, she's another president in Pfizer, to take his place. And she was up there and she was grilled by a member of the European Parliament named Robert Rose. And this is how it went. Take a look.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
The speed of science, we are going to name this show The Speed of Science. It's one of the most ridiculous terms I've ever heard, especially when what she's talking about is rushing science, which is the dumbest thing you can ever do. But this just blew up. This was just over a week ago. You pretty much have to have your head buried in the sand and pour cement around your shoulders to not have heard that this is going on. It's being shared by millions around the world. It's a shocking realization for everybody that hasn't been watching The Highwire. Let's be clear about that, and we're going to talk in more detail about this. But at first I thought, what is the big deal, right? I mean, everyone already knew, as Piers Morgan is saying, he knows that it doesn't stop transmission, therefore I shouldn't be attacking the anti-vaxxers any longer. But it occurs to me now, as I've watched this a few times, what's different here is Piers Morgan and Tony Fauci and all these people that are in the media have been trying to spin the story that the science changed on us, that it went through this, natural mutation itself where we were just trying to figure out what's going on, trying to catch up with it, and therefore you have to accept that, yeah, we got it wrong in some of the places, and Tony Fauci's on a giant apology tour now, but what this tells us is that's a lie. What this statement now says is you always knew you couldn't say it stopped transmission. You always knew you weren't there. You didn't, think it did and then get surprised. It wasn't the mutation of Omicron or something that got around it. She's saying we never tested for that.
Right.
Literally the definition of a vaccination being it creates immunity so I can't pass it on. You never achieved this product could do this when you mandated it in the world. I mean, it really is quite shocking. It certainly is shocking to the folks in Europe and Robert Rose.
Right, and so that admission and that testimony, although it was not legally binding, has hit the zeitgeist. It's gone all over the world. It's even come over the pond, as they say, to our media and Tucker Carlson, who interviewed Robert Rose right after that. This is what it looked like.
Okay.
It really was a special moment. For the first time, Pfizer admitted that the vaccine was not tested on stopping the transmission of the virus when it entered the market. And this has massive implications. Governments pushed millions of people worldwide to get vaccinated by telling them, telling you to do it for your grandmother. And they tricked perfectly healthy young people into taking this jab using false arguments. And they used big words such as antisocial to sow an immense hatred against people who refuse to comply with the government's wishes. And even worse, many governments, including mine, actually introduced so-called COVID passports. These passports made access to parts of society conditional. Those who did not wish to get vaccinated lost that access. not being able to visit a restaurant or a gym, all in the name of public health. Our governments love to talk about institutional discrimination, but this was real institutional discrimination.
Yes.
In many countries, like the US and Italy, vaccine mandates were introduced for certain professions. Many people lost their job, their livelihood, their business, because they stood by their principles. Austria even had a lockdown for the unvaccinated because of this reason. The government literally imprisoned people within their own homes. All of this was based on the idea that vaccination helps prevent the spread of the virus. Otherwise, why should people out of society? But this has now proven to be a big lie. Even the president of for International Development Market of Pfizer now admits that there was no scientific basis to say vaccination would stop the transmission of the virus. And I find this one of the biggest scandals of our time.
I think he's absolutely right. I think this, and I have said exactly that over the last couple of years, this will prove to be one of the greatest scandals of all times. It will go down as one of the greatest scientific blunders in history. As Geert Vanden Bossche has described it, a colossal blunder. Institutional, segregation and this idea that it was okay, as he said, to assault people, to put them down, to segregate them out of society based on this premise that this product was protecting grandma, protecting those outside of ourselves, being promised that it stopped transmission. I want to take this moment very quickly because I know that there are brand new people watching this show, Jeffrey, and what I've been mind blown by is the amount of people that got this vaccine and because they were told it's 95% effective at keeping you from getting the virus and therefore you can't spread it, which was the definition we all, thought existed around vaccinations. But now they're saying to me, oh no, I always knew. They never said that it stopped transmission. They said that it stopped symptomatic disease. It's like, it's literally, you see how that mass formation, that brainwashing happens by media, that they erase your memory of what was said. Luckily for us, this is true for me too, the cameras have been rolling on me this whole time. I have been speaking my mind this whole time. You can go back and see everything that I said, just as I can go back and see everything that they said. So just for all of you, I know you have friends out there that have literally changed this tune, and you're like mind blown, and they believe it. It's a group pathological lie that no, I always knew that it was just 95% effective at reducing symptoms, not at stopping transmission. I have proof that that is not what they sold you on, and here it is.
Everyone who takes the vaccine is not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal.
We can kind of almost see the end. We're vaccinating so very fast. Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
Getting vaccinated and getting a booster shot when eligible can save your life and protect you and your family and friends from getting seriously ill and spreading infection.
What do you think the probability is? 80%?
Personally, I think it's 100%. I think that there's a reduction in transmission.
Right. Essentially, vaccines block you from getting and giving the virus.
We have all the vaccines we need. We just need our people to take it. A, for their own protection, for the protection of their family, but also to break the chain of transmission. You want to be a dead end to the virus. So when the virus gets to you, you stop it. You don't allow it to use you as the stepping stone to the next person.
Failure to get vaccinated doesn't just put you at risk. I think this is what is important. In a way, it's not you who suffers if you don't, simply. It's also other people.
If you've done the right thing and gotten vaccinated, you deserve the freedom to be safe from COVID-19, to have your kids safe from COVID, to get back to the things you love.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
If enough people get vaccinated, it actually halts transmission.
The people who are not getting vaccines, you don't have to listen to a minority of people who are being harmful to the greater good and who are not acting on logic, reason, and science.
I want everyone to be vaccinated so that they're safe and so that their families are safe and so that life can feel a little more normal again.
Now we know that the vaccines work well enough that the virus stops with every vaccinated person. A vaccinated person gets exposed to the virus, The virus does not infect them. The virus cannot then use that person to go anywhere else. It cannot use a vaccinated person as a host to go get more people. That means the vaccines will get us to the end of this.
You could not be more graphically or articulately wrong, right? I mean, when you listen to what they're saying, Tony Fauci telling you it stops with you. This will stop the virus. Rachel Maddow saying we now know that if you get vaccinated, you cannot catch this. You cannot give it to anyone else. All of them saying you're going to protect your family, not just yourself. This is your duty. All of that now. All of that in light of what we have seen. Whether it was a changing tide, which it wasn't. Peter Hotez, who worked on a COVID vaccine and came out against this one early on, saying, I'm worried about antibody-dependent enhancement, which is a totally different conversation. Right. All of these people shilling for this product and dead wrong when they said, we know that it stops transmission, because we've now just heard from one of the presidents at Pfizer, yeah, we never tested for that.
Right. And so the members of this European Parliament committee, the EU Union, they took it further. So what they actually asked for was, we want the documents. We want to see what was in the contracts that you signed our people onto. We want your phone text messages to see who you were talking to when these contracts were happening. That's to the EU president, Ursula von der Leyen. And so this committee didn't just stop. That was icing on the cake when Janie Smalls from Pfizer admitted what she admitted. That was just icing on the cake. So this group took it a step further. They formed a small committee they called a public press conference, and they had this to say. This was Francisca Donato. She's an Italian member of the European Parliament. Listen to this, Del.
All right.
The conduct of Pfizer-BioNTech, the biggest pharmaceutical company involved in the COVID-19 vaccines production, is deplorable and unacceptable in a democratic framework as the Union one. Yesterday, in the official European Parliament Special Committee for COVID Pandemic Management, the Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, refused to appear to answer our legitimate questions about his private text messages with the President of EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, that have already been considered to be irregular, according to the Transparency EU regulation, by the EU Ombudsman and the EU Court of Auditors. He has sent Mrs. Small in his place, who has not answered the most important questions that our special committee has addressed to her regarding the company's price policy, the release of clinical trials reports, adverse effects, and other issues concerning the safety and efficacy of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines. The continuous non-fulfillment of the duties of transparency by Pfizer's executives clearly violates the EU citizens' rights to know in detail how and for which purpose the taxpayers' money is spent. We're discussing about billions of public money that has been managed by the EU Commission by secret agreements directly conducted with the company's CEO, away from democratic control of people by their elected representatives in the EU Parliament. The refusal by President von der Leyen to disclose the content of their text messages first, and the denial by Mr. Bourla to appear in front of the Parliament then, followed by the reticent behavior of Mrs. Small yesterday, casts concerning shadows on the legitimacy of the entire contract award process, leaving suspicion of corruption to emerge. I think that companies who behave this way should be banned by the lobbies allowed to enter the Parliament and the Commission, and that further investigation is needed by competent authorities to let the truth come to light and to secure the full right of the EU citizens to transparency and public interest-oriented EU policies. Thank you very much.
I just want to drive home right now as you're watching this. This is literally happening at the same time. This is just a week ago, 9 days ago. This is the statement being made at the European Parliament. This is a person, one of many now, calling for an investigation, saying that Pfizer should not even be allowed to be a part of a lobby allowed into the Parliament. That's how strongly she feels about what's happened. If Alec Bourla feels like he got around, dodging a bullet here by sending in his underling, it did nothing but light a fuse. This is outrageous. I mean, these are high up individuals, representatives in Parliament that are demanding answers, and you and I have a sense of what those answers are, and it does not look good.
Right, and she's saying questions like, we're looking at corruption, conflicts of interest, we want transparency. You do a little bit of research, you don't have to scratch the surface that far to see things like this. In December of 2020, when the first vaccines were going into the arms of a UK grandmother, we have Ursula von der Leyen's husband, Heiko.
And so she's the head, she's the one that signed these contracts. She's basically the president or head of the EU.
The head of the European Union, yes.
European Union, and they're asking, what did you sign? Like, they're not being allowed as members of that same parliament. They're not being allowed as EU members to see what the heck she signed. What was the agreement, right? That's what they're asking for.
And allegedly, there's text messages where she was texting Albert Bourla back and forth during that time. What are they talking about? They won't be revealed.
Wow.
And so if you look into a little bit of what was happening at that time as well. Her husband, Ursula von der Leyen's husband, takes a position as medical director at a company called Orgenesis in New York, of all places.
Wow.
So there's the actual page. You can see him there, medical director, Heiko von der Leyen. There he is. And so in April of 2022, this was well known by everybody, saying, what's going on here? There's an investigative reporting that looked into this, and this is what they had to say. Let's look at that investigative report to see what they wrote. Okay. They wrote this. Albert, Ursula, Heiko, the dangerous relationship between the president of the European Commission and the CEO of Pfizer, they were on it back in April. And they write this, according to them, basically they're saying, Dr. Heiko von der Leyen, husband of the president of the European Commission, who until then had been running a clinic in Hanover, that's in Germany, was recruited in December 2020 as medical director of the pharmaceutical company Orgenesis, which is based in New York State, just like Pfizer.
Going to have to assume that was a pretty decent salary hike.
Absolutely, in the tune of over $1 million, I hear. So it goes on to say, Orgenesis is a biotech company developing cell and gene therapies using messenger RNA technology. In May 2020, the company announced the launch of its new vaccine platform targeting the COVID virus. When Dr. van der Leyen joins the Orgenesis board, the European Commission had just concluded a series of contracts with pharmaceutical companies between August and November 2020, including 2 with Pfizer BioNTech.
Wow. So at the same time, Ursula, who's secretly having conversations with Alex Bourla, secretly signing documents that the rest of the EU hasn't seen yet or demanding to see, her husband gets this giant promotion onto a biotech company making an mRNA COVID vaccination.
In New York, right down the road.
Now, just to be clear, they haven't yet connected that directly to Pfizer or one of the many companies supposed to deliver vaccines, right?
Yeah, correct. Well, this was, we're looking at this in the spirit of, these are questions that need to be answered.
Good questions.
Along with many other questions that some transparency may help shed some light on.
Yeah.
So now we go back to this press conference. It didn't just stop with Francesca. We have another gentleman, his name's Cristian Terres. He is a Romanian member of the European Parliament, and he has a blistering admonishment. Take a look at this.
All right.
When we found out that the CEO of Pfizer decided not to come and answer questions, this is not an inquiry committee. So he was not bound by law to come, and, he was not on record, he was not facing any criminal punishments in case he's lying in front of this committee. But even in that case, he refused to come and answer some concrete and specific questions. Questions that I think all of us and all of you have. And the first question is, what exactly in these contracts? What are they hiding exactly? I mean, in the previous press conferences, I showed you some of the pages, from these contracts. This is how they were disclosed to us, and to the public, and to the press. Obviously, after some of us and some of the brave journalists asked, what are the contracts signed between the European Commission and these pharmaceutical companies? So this is how they disclose the contracts. Over 100 pages. Every contract with Pfizer, with Moderna, tens of pages of those contracts were blacked out. So yesterday when we asked, I was the one asking, and some of my colleagues asked, when are they going to fully release these contracts? the representative of Pfizer, who was sent to replace the CEO of Pfizer, said that they can't fully disclose these contracts because they have some commercial secrets over there, and they have to protect their interests. Now I'm asking you, what about the interests of our people? What about the interests of the Europeans whose money was spent, or wasted, I would say now, to buy these medical products that are not providing what they were marketed for? Because what we found out yesterday, when one of my colleagues asked if they tested, in this case Pfizer, if Pfizer tested, if their medical product is stopping the spread of the virus, we were shocked to find out yesterday that they haven't tested their vaccine to see if it's stopping the spread of the virus. So we are now more than a year after the green certificate, the digital green certificate was imposed in the European Union, and people were forced to be vaccinated with a medical product in order to exercise their basic fundamental rights, and they were told, and we were told. We were voted against the green certificate, but many of our colleagues voted in favor of it because they believe what these companies have said, that if you get vaccinated, you will not be infected, and you will not spread the virus. They even ran a campaign and said, get vaccinated in order to keep your grandmother and your parents healthy. And we find out now, after more than a year, that when they requested the special marketing authorization, they haven't tested the vaccine to see if it's stopping the spread of the virus. So I'm asking again, and we are asking again, what are they going to hide? What do they hide exactly? Why aren't they transparent with their medical product? We heard yesterday, I was shocked. Because Pfizer used this opportunity just to do a PR campaign and even lecture us, why are we asking this and not asking that? Who are they to question us? What kind of questions do we ask? We are elected by the people, for the people, not they. And they are supposed to answer all these questions, which they have not.
Folks, I just want to say, I know that as we're sitting here today, it's a dark day in the United States of America. Our own CDC is turned on the people against our will. Obviously, by the low vaccination rate of our children, it shows where this country is at with their faith in this vaccine. The CDC doesn't care, now mandated upon us. But this right here, what we're watching right now, is the beginning of the end for this vaccine program right now, and especially this Pfizer vaccine. Jeffrey, these are dogs with a bone now. They are asking all the right questions, and they're pissed off.
Right.
And rightfully so. Where is our money gone? What did we pay for? Why did we all have to be the face on television of this program that took civil liberties away, locked people away, destroyed their jobs, all telling them, we're doing this to you because this product is going to stop transmission, and now he's saying, we now know that you always knew that it didn't and couldn't?
Yeah, it's hitting breakaway speeds, Del, and it's a social movement. It's obviously becoming a political movement now to have these questions being answered, but it couldn't come at a worse time. In Europe, all across Europe right now, inflation is hitting. People are having to decide whether to pay money to heat themselves or pay money to feed themselves. And so that's rightfully so asking, their representatives are asking, where did our money go? We have $71 billion that we just threw into a vaccine that's not stopping transmission. But Del, what if the vaccine didn't just fail to stop transmission? What if it increased all-cause mortality? Now we're getting into the territory of the Highwires investigations of over the past year. Take a look at literally one of the most historic moments we're probably seeing out of Europe when it comes to this conversation. Look at this.
All right.
There's another issue right now raised all across Europe. The excess mortality rate in the month of July 2020. According to Eurostat, in the month of July, the excess mortality rate all across European Union went up 16% more than the average of 2016 and 2019. Now, if you look on the map here, this is released by the Eurostat. It's not from us. If you look on this map, you will see that the countries with the highest vaccination rate have right now the highest mortality rate. So obviously we ask, is there a connection between being vaccinated and having a higher mortality rate? Everybody's avoiding answering this, I would say, logical question.
Wow. I mean, all I can say is wow. Obviously, we have been sharing Euromomo data, Eurostat data all the way along, showing things like this. But that, just seeing him hold that, we haven't looked in a while. That's horrifying. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of red in there. What is he pointing to?
Yeah, well, let's bring that map up and let's take a look at that together here.
Okay.
So, as he said, rightfully so, the places in the European Union with the highest vaccination rates are also showing the highest excess mortality, and that's July 2022. So you see Portugal, you see Italy, you see France, Germany, Ireland's up there, even Spain, and those are some of the countries that had the most restrictive, authoritarian lockdowns and measures in place to get people vaccinated. So this is a conversation that we're really talking about here, and it's.
I mean, almost nobody. Just take it back for a second. We'll look at that in a second. We'll look at this. The excess mortality hits plus 16%, highest 2022 value so far. But let's go back to this map, because folks, if you look at that little, anti-Dakota ring there on the side, that deep dark red, which looks like these countries are bleeding, that's where you're at a plus 15, above 15% excess mortality. But the orange, that's 10 to 15. The gold, 8 to 10. Really, if you think of that light yellow is like 0, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, and as you're pointing out, the countries like Portugal that were in the headlines bragging with the highest vaccine rates, blood red, bleeding in those countries.
Right. And we saw this from the studies. We saw this from the scientific papers being written. We saw this from the Office of National Statistics until they stopped publishing their data in the UK. This was something that you called out in March of this year. We knew that all-cause mortality would be the conversation. Let's take a look back at that moment.
All right. People say, Del, they're going to try and hide it. Hide what? You might be able to hide COVID deaths. You might be able to sort of, manipulate the COVID deaths and take people that are having heart attacks and put them in the COVID category. You might be able to hide the actual, COVID vaccine rates and who was truly vaccinated. Were they fully vaccinated? Were they boosted? Did they only have one shot? Was it only 14 days after the second shot? They're manipulating all of that. But one thing you cannot manipulate is the all-cause mortality. Just meaning if there's a rise in just death across the board in every nation, that is going to be really hard to hide. I mean, it's, this is sort of the beginning of the I told you so's, but it was so clear. We've watched manipulation of the data. They have been doing things like saying, well, if you got one vaccine, you're still unvaccinated. If you got 2 vaccines, you're considered unvaccinated until 14 days after the second shot. How many people did that vaccine injure that went on to a death in the unvaccinated column? Right. I mean, all of these manipulations, all the people that were testing positive with COVID in hospitals was listed as a COVID death when really they died in a car accident. I mean, all of these things were manipulations. But what we knew is, and I said it right there, and now we're seeing it on the stage in the European Union. What you cannot argue with is why the hell, when this vaccine was supposed to have dropped death rates in the middle of whatever a pandemic, we are still seeing a rise in death rates. A rise when this virus is at the weakest point it's ever been in. Why are our death rates exceeding 16% higher than they were before COVID? What is it? What are we dying from? And as you said, insurance actuaries showing us, and it isn't the elderly, 18 to 64, a 40% rise in payouts to death by insurance companies in that age group. This is going to be the story of our time, and I'm amazed. Every time I think about the CDC signing their names on, these people are signing their names to a document that will live in infamy, as I started the show out with, in the face of a growing death rate that really appears to only have one source as we know it. The only change in humanity that everyone was involved in that could explain an across-the-board excess death rate appears to be this vaccine, and yet that's not stopping the CDC.
Right. And the final conversation here is brought to you by Mislav Kolakusic. Okay. He is a Croatian lawyer, another member of the European Parliament. And I say Croatian lawyer because the way he attacks this, he hits Pfizer in the place that's going to make them pay attention, which is their pocketbook. Take a look at what he had to say.
All right.
Stotine miliona građana diljem svijeta U posljednja 2 dana je putem društvenih mreža vidjelo odgovor direktora Pfizera na pitanje kolege Roba Rossa. Je li provedeno testiranje cjepiva na sprječavanje prijenosa virusa? Dobio je izravan odgovor. Nije provedeno. Dakle, uopće nije provedeno testiranje cjepiva na prijenos virusa. Nadalje, s obzirom da iz drugih dostupnih podataka, pogotovo podataka engleskog NHS-a, koji precizno vodi statistiku oboljelih, hospitaliziranih i umrlih prema takozvanom cijepnom statusu 1., 2., 3. i 4. doze i necijepljeni, nedvojbeno proizlazi da ne postoji razlika u zarazi, oboljevanju i umiranju od COVID-19 između takozvanih cijepljenih i necijepljenih građana. Slijedom toga, nužno je odmah raskinuti ugovor o nabavci daljnjih doza, jer su nam prodali lažna cjepiva. Zatražiti povrat dosad uplaćenih sredstava u iznosu od 2,5 milijarde eura, te pokrenuti kazneni progon protiv Pfizera i drugih. U suprotnom, i sami sudjelujemo u vršenju kaznenog djela nabavke i promoviranja lažnih lijekova, te uništenju proračuna Europske unije u visini od 71 milijarde eura. Ukoliko i za koliko se Ursula von der Leyen obvezala u ime svih nas platiti farmaceutima. Moje pitanje je kad ćete raskinuti ugovor? Hvala.
It's amazing how he describes it as we must not participate any longer in this crime of promoting fake vaccines.
Right.
I mean, that sentence, the crime of promoting